Millions of frontline workers keep our economy running and are provided with the latest technology to do their jobs. But digital adoption, especially by frontline workers, is really hard.
This is Frontline Innovators. We explore how to overcome challenges and achieve success when we empower our essential workers.
I'm Justin Lake.
And I'm Gene Signorini. Together, we speak with experts who are leading the way and driving digital transformation to the front line.
This podcast is sponsored by Skyllful, on a mission to help frontline workers learn and use the technology needed to succeed in their jobs. I'm your host, Justin Lake, and I'm very excited about today's episode because we have an exceptionally unique guest, somebody very special to us, and I'm very excited to introduce you to her and have a fantastic conversation. So today's guest, as many of you know, this show is sponsored by Skyllful. And today's guest is a member of the Skyllful team. She just completed a significant professional development goal, and I wanted to bring her here to tell us all about it. She is currently the Learning Performance Designer for Skyllful. Please welcome to the show, Erica Keener. Hello, Erica.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to come on.
I'm so excited to have you here. I've been dying to have this conversation with you about the accomplishment of your recent goal. And as we were kind of thinking about some of the shows we had lined up, we thought it would just be a perfect time for us to share your learnings with our audience. And perhaps, we really try not to talk too much about Skyllful on the show because the show is not just about Skyllful. The show is really about just the challenges associated with technology adoption in general. But you have such a great vantage point because you work with our clients and get to see the ways that they're implementing with Skyllful and some of the challenges that they have even alongside implementing with Skyllful. And so I thought it'd be such a great opportunity for us to bring that experience to the show and share those observations and insights with the audience. So let's get started.
It's exciting. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you the same question that we ask every one of our other guests, and I want to get your take on what you think is the biggest challenge facing the deskless workforce today.
To summarize what I think the biggest challenge is, it's balancing the need for autonomy with a potential lack of communication. And to justify that a little bit, I feel like the folks who are out have to be self-reliant. They have to be able to make decisions without a whole lot of guidance. But then there's things that happen during the 8 to 5 business hours where they're not informed of what those changes are. So the expectation is that they will make great decisions. In fact, the same decisions that maybe, corporate or their supervisor would make, but they don't have the knowledge to make that decision. And that causes a rift that contributes to the us versus them type of situation. And so I would say they are expected to be self-sufficient, but they're not given the empowerment to be self-sufficient.
That's really pretty powerful. You also just said something that I think is interesting, and it's come up on a few of the shows, but it's kind of the us versus them, that rift that you just talked about. I think when we have talked with a lot of our guests who have been change management professionals, they're very aware of that challenge and they work really hard to try to solve for that. So I'm curious, I know we're going to save some of these topics until we get further into the show. I want to give everybody a little bit about, your background, but before we get into that, I'd be curious to say or ask you, is there a way that you see to overcome that? What do you think might be some of the ways that we can be empowering for them right out of the gate to maybe eliminate some of that friction?
Yeah. So right out of the gate, if anyone's ever in a scenario where there is an us versus them situation, the fastest way is just make it us. And I know that's so much easier said than accomplished, but in adult, learning theory and brains and most people who experience trying to convince an adult to do anything at all, it's pretty common knowledge that adults tend to follow their own advice and their own plans much better than other people nudging them in a particular direction. So I think just involving people, not only keeping them informed through great communication, but involving them in what that change is potentially going to be, makes them part of the team instead of something that's being done to them or getting in their way because it's being done. So yeah, let's just get rid of the them. Let's just make it us.
Fantastic. I think that's really good advice. And that's a really good quote for today's show. Just make it us. I love that. I think we should put that up on our wall.
Well, great.
So let's let the audience understand a little bit about who they're hearing from here. You have a really interesting background. I was going back over, I mean, we've known each other now for a couple of years, but I went back over your LinkedIn profile, just like I do for all of the other guests. And I was reminded I had a couple of aha moments as I was going back over your past. So take us back through that journey. How did you end up working at Skyllful, and what did your career look like before you got here?
Yeah, so there's a sea change involved in there.
Sure.
I originally was a career trajectory in clinical medicine. So I was that person at the surgeon or the doctor in the ER, like getting your blood and doing all the clinical hands-on things. And I'm still a total science nerd. But as I grew into that career, my career path turned more towards an administrative side, more of the business aspect of it. And when I got the opportunities to run clinics myself and to, have staff and manage that, the thing that I really, really loved was onboarding. And it sounds so silly because for being such a sciencey nerd, and having the opportunity to participate in surgeries and procedures and research, the thing that I loved was teaching other people how to get excited about that. And so it seems like a very drastic change, but I got more into the corporate trainer, which is a really easy entry into the learning and development space. I also had a bridge in medicine. So EMR training was a very natural kind of progression. And that led to developing curriculum where none existed and being able to get more into the analytics of it. I still very much appreciate getting a return on investment for the companies. As you know, I'm a total sellout. I got my MBA a couple of years back. So I'm very much now business minded, and bridging the gap between the people who are making the business go and what the business needs to do to be successful. And that's how it happened. So for about the past 10 years, it's really been about learning and development in any industry. I'm no longer, pigeonholed into medicine, although I still love it. And just getting out there and meeting tons of people and seeing how I can kind of do the most good by maintaining those two visions simultaneously. Like, what does the learner need? And then what does that business need? And how do we mesh those together?
Is there anything you miss about clinical medicine part of your career?
Oh, I think I miss kind of sitting around after work and swapping like gross stories. There's just a funness about being in the weeds in an emergency room at 2 a.m. and you survive the night, and there's just an adrenaline that's involved in that. Not that there's not adrenaline in learning and development, but there's certainly less risk of, getting hepatitis. It's good.
Is it less risk or no risk? I'm curious.
I would hope no risk.
Just wanted to be clear on that. That's really good. So when you ended up at Skyllful, I think even your job has changed a little bit since even when you first came on. I think as I think back to when you first came on the team, we were still, not that we're not still trying to do this, but we're still trying to figure out what are the roles? How should we define the roles, and what are the skills that we're looking for to help develop us as a product company and to help ensure success with our clients. Why don't you just share a little bit about what you do at Skyllful and how you're helping our clients today?
Yeah, which is so exciting, and it's good to be part of a team where there is reach in the job scope and getting to learn new things and professional development. So I think originally what the plan for me was to come in a very specific, learning development specialist, curriculum design, kind of applying the learning theory that, I've picked up over the years to what was already being done and make a couple of tweaks. I have been so lucky to come into a team where I could look at it from a user perspective and say, hey, it'd be kind of cool if we could do ABC, and then the dev team actually does it. That's amazing. And then getting more opportunities to get in front of our customers, which has been very satisfying for me because I enjoy talking to people. And I do miss a little bit of that, the old days with the, 10 hours of classroom training. So getting to connect with the learners, getting to connect with everybody involved in the ladder of these projects has been very exciting. What I feel I bring to the table now is still that I still can say, hey, I understand your goals. This would be the most efficient and effective way to achieve achieve those goals. I still get to do authoring of, the development and the design part of it. But now I also feel like I'm bringing more of a total project awareness into it, which is not just the project management portion of it, but how we can guide companies through change where maybe they were a little not as prepared as they thought. They just thought, okay, we're going to buy it and implement it and skip a few steps in between. And I've really been able to see what that looks like when it's done well, and what that looks like when there's maybe more room for improvement, and how that's going to affect the outcome of the success of our customers.
Yeah, that's such a great way to set the stage for our conversation today, because I think this podcast, I have learned so much as one of the hosts of this podcast by talking with all the amazing professionals that we've had on the show prior to today, that have really expanded my understanding about the need for an effective change management strategy and execution. And it's helped me understand, even as one of the proud leaders of a business where I think we're really trying to change the way large enterprise handles technology adoption for their frontline workers, I have gotten very comfortable with the statement that if you think you're just going to buy Skyllful and not combine that with a solid communication and change plan, then you're just adding another piece of software to your tech stack that's also probably not going to work, right? And I hate saying that for the reason I don't want to push a potential customer away from us, but it does really require a thoughtful process. And I think we've had the good fortune of learning, and we get to see a lot of different customers and how they implement. And like you said, some have done a spectacular job. Others have a little bit more room for improvement just in the maturity of their organization from a change standpoint. But I'm so excited about the role that you play. And for our audience who doesn't understand, Erica is not just a part of a learning and development team. We actually refer to it as learning and customer success, because we're really combining the best practices of learning and development strategy and execution with a team that's focused on customer success for Skyllful customers. And so it kind of brings together a typical role in a SaaS software company, which is customer success focused, but we're bringing experts like Erica right in front of our customers to bring their best practices. And that's really what Erica is doing with our clients today.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's a good segue into the professional development activities that you've had going on. So tell us about what you've done, why you did it, why you wanted to pursue this path.
Yeah, I first off, it's so fantastic. The culture in a company that supports professional development is one of the best things in the world. Knowing that you're allowed to learn stuff fearlessly is just such an amazing gift that any company could give to an employee. And as a customer success person, if I go into a company and I see that that's part of the company culture, I instantly think like these guys are on a next level. Like that, it really is very telling. So I appreciate that so much. I had really wanted to kind of expand my scope, and I was leaning towards either project management, honestly, or change management. And as I started to talk to the leadership in the company and started to talk to other people in those various industries and those careers, I realized that one, since learning and development is so closely rooted to change, changes of sorts, it made a lot more sense to do change management. It also was something that felt like a missing piece in some of the implementations that I've done, not just for this company, but in some of my past companies. And I could start to see a direct correlation between the success of those customers, which in turn is a SaaS company's success, and the success and the happiness and the overall satisfaction of the people using the various products and their job ease that they get from it. And I really just kind of attached to the idea that I'm going to learn change management. I'm going to get this under my belt and learn what there is to know so that I can talk that talk and make those suggestions to our clients. So that's what I've been able to accomplish is taking a change management certification program. And now I need to practice the things that I've learned and keep repeating them so I don't forget them. But really excited to bring that missing piece to the table when we take on people and make these projects happen for them.
That is so awesome. Tell us about the program. Tell us the specifics. You chose to go down the path with ATD. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So
that path.
Yeah, so ATD member, which is just for people who may not be familiar, ATD is a very, very tippity top resource for people who are in the learning and development, talent development space. So happy to trust them and see them as a source of authority on this. I felt like immediately knew I was in the right place because this was a good once over. This wasn't trying to focus on a specific thing. Like, for example, we want to change one department or we want to change, a giant, company. It was very broad so that it's applicable to every client that we would potentially, have communication with, which was nice. The focus was very highly set on making sure that the leaders are buying in, and that the theory that I kind of talked about, where we need to kind of unite and get rid of the us against them attitude, that really became evident very quickly in this program. But that's necessary. It can't just be one person saying "do because I say so." It really needs to be an entire team effort, and it needs to be soup to nuts. Just everybody involved needs to know what the change is, what the goals of this are, why the change happened, how it will affect everybody else. So the unification of that was just really impressive to me, and tons of aha moments along the way, learning about, hey, that can't just be one player in charge of everything. It needs to be, everyone needs to have certain roles and responsibilities. Just mind-blowing stuff for me. It was so great to sit in.
One of the things that came up in our conversations internally was that we have to be careful that we're not trying to position ourselves as a change management consultancy, right? Because we have a product, and where our primary functions here are to support our clients with the implementation of our product and their overall technology adoption challenges with frontline workers. Mm-hmm. But you've had some experiences with some of our client interactions where it was clear they didn't have an entire plan put forth. They may have had components of it. Mm-hmm. They didn't have a plan. So what do you think our role should be? And you and I haven't talked a lot about this outside of the podcast. Okay. So, I'm kind of opening this up a little bit here just for some conversation. What do you think our role should be? And your role in particular, when we are bringing on those clients, and they may not have a full-blown OCM team in place today, they may recognize the need for it, but they may not have, a very, a lot of maturity from a change standpoint. They may not have best practices established. So what can our role be then to help them?
Sure. And I think that that's absolutely accurate. We're not trying to, join the change management circuit, but I do think that one of the things that we're already doing as part of our project launches is spending just a tiny bit of time on mitigating risk. And typically that's in the context of to the project. But I think that there's a lot of value in saying, hey, with this product, the data suggests that if you can, have someone to communicate, have accountability, that, these kinds of factors, you will get a better result. You'll get a better yield from this. And I think that that's something that, without even mentioning the words change management, customers respond to very well. If someone said, hey, buy XYZ cell phone, and we never talk about plugging it in to charge it. Like, if we tell someone charge this every night so it'll work the whole next day, they'd be like, oh, cool, it's a good tip, thank you. And I feel like that is also necessary with this. We don't have to call it change management, but we can say, hey, for this to be the most successful and reach the most people and give the most happiness and delight from your implementation, these are our recommendations. And I think that's something that's easily worked into what we already do with our clients.
Can you tell the story? Let's not mention any proper names, although if those folks happen to hear the story, I don't think they'd be offended by us telling it. But we had a situation recently. We were onboarding a customer, and the term change management came up, and mm-hmm. I think who I'm talking about. Tell us a little bit about that story, and just leave all the proper names out to protect.
Absolutely. And absolutely. And when I was talking to you about it, I even mentioned, like making a comparison to cooking a meal, right? So I said change management and almost got, yuck. Almost got this kind of response like, no, we don't do that. We don't have that. Not interested. Move on.
So we're onboarding a new client, just to give you context here. We're onboarding a brand new client, and we're sitting down for a series of kickoff meetings to get things rolling. And Erica mentions change management, and everybody's like, wait a second, we don't want any of that.
Oh yeah, it was a very, very obvious vocal reaction to the concept of change management. As we started to continue our discovery and kick off the process, we started dropping hints about maybe we can get the supervisors, we're doing this hierarchy, maybe we can get the supervisors to train first, and then they could show people how great this was and train the trainer. And then they started, the client starts kicking out ideas and starting to get excited. Yeah, we could have one meeting, we could have a lunch and learn, and they could come in and they could do this. We should make them do this. And they got so excited. And I said, okay, I can see what's happening here. Like we said, change management, and that shut the door. That was a bias. It's like offering somebody a vegetarian meal first, right? You give them the food and it's delicious, and then they love it. And then you can tell them it's vegetarian. This is what we need to do. We need to not say change management. We need to talk about customer success first and let them come up with all these great ideas. And that was just proof positive, because by the end of that discovery session, we probably could say, hey, you're change managers. We already identified who's who and who's going to do what and all these great plans. And they really had excitement for it, where their first reaction was honestly just to say bleh.
Well, I love the story because it is about 180 degrees opposite from some other stories that I've heard as the host of the podcast. And so I want to just call out that contrast for you and for any of the listeners. So what we've heard from some other change management folks is that their frustration is that deep into a project plan, somebody will come into the OCM team and say, like, hey, can you guys come in? Hey, I know it's the 11th hour, but we need to put a little bit of that change management stuff on this project. Like it's some kind of bolt-on thing that they can just add a line item at the end. And so in that case, the contrast from your story is that in this case, stakeholders are actually coming and saying, hey, we need a little bit of that change management stuff. Hey, can you put a little bit of hot sauce on top of that meal?
Exactly.
It's better. Right. And
exactly.
It's really way too late if you're already in the 11th hour to bring in some of that change management and sprinkle some of the magic dust on top of the project and just expect that things are going to magically get better.
Agreed.
Right. And so that part has made a lot of sense when we've talked about that on the show. But the story that you just told, I think, is kind of the opposite of that. Right. And it's people kind of pushing back perhaps because of the terminology. And I wonder if there are some things for our audience to learn, even some of the experienced, OCM folks out there who may be, many of our guests are really advocates, evangelists for change management. And I wonder sometimes if the terminology that they may be using is actually causing the listeners to push back a little bit, because they're like, hey, we don't want to have to learn this whole like new thing, right? So I think the way that you and the team kind of talked through this scenario with our client was to say, okay, well, let's just stop using that terminology and let's just talk about what some of the best practices are, right? It doesn't matter all them. We can work on the glossary of terms later.
Right.
But let's just talk through some best practices here. And through that, it's a lot of common sense, kind of simple stuff. But what you found was that it became much more effective to just talk about it in simpler terms. And that's what I thought was so exciting about that example.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can take that and we can go forward with that, learning from that experience. And we have this example now of like, hey, how did we get them excited about this? And let's keep doing that. Let's keep the momentum up through the entire project and all the way through until it's actually been not just implemented, but indoctrinated into their new normal.
Yeah. So let's talk about some things that happen maybe in the absence of a well thought out change strategy, because we have experienced this a couple of times as a team with some of our clients. And I always want to make sure that we are learning so that we can be a better partner to our customers, but also the purpose of this podcast is to help raise awareness of these types of things for anybody who may be listening or watching. So what are some of the things that go wrong with implementations of technology on the front lines when there hasn't been a well thought out change plan put in place?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's almost the formula to create a failure, and there's things that happen so consistently. The big things are lack of communication. And I'm going to use the word accountability and that's a little bit of a dicey word to use because I don't mean that I should be punished if I'm not on board. But you need to clearly understand what happens if we don't change, which kind of loops back into communication. So what we've observed when there's not quite a unified goal, for example, oh, I want this product because it'll save me money. No, I want it because it'll save me time. That communication gets too muddy. People ask, why are we doing this change? And they get different answers that invalidates the change. So we need a unified concept. We need a unified message at all levels. I think when there is lack of inputs from all levels, the person who's out there, working on repairing an elevator in the middle of a desert, they have no internet connection, weren't given an email address as part of their gig. We've just severed their communication. So now things happen to them. And if you don't explain to them, hey, what are your thoughts? We made this decision that we're going to make a change. Have you had experience with these various apps? Have you had any experience with this? Do you want it configured in a certain way? So when there's a lack of that, it does cause what I call an arm crosser sometimes. It's that person who's like, I'm just going to keep doing it on paper because that's what I know. And there also needs to be a bit of an accountability component. And what I mean by that is, it doesn't have to be grand scale. I know we're talking about most our customers are big companies. But if you were trying to train one soul to do something, it doesn't matter who that is, if it's a coworker, a child, a dog, it doesn't matter. But if you're trying to teach something and get a certain outcome and you give up on that, because, well, that's going to be what it's going to be, or what can you do? You can't make them, read a book. You can't make them do something in a certain way. That also kind of breaks down the unified, harmonized goal that leadership could have, that the whole company could have. So there needs to be some kind of rationale where it's like, we need you to do this training in this way. Here's why. What are your thoughts about that? Let's anticipate some of the resistance. Talk to me about that, because there might be a really good reason why, and we can fix it and move forward together so that everybody's moving towards that same goal. They know why, they know what's in it for them, hugely important. And also they know what happens, what the consequences could be. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be really slow. I'm not using the app anymore. Oh no, I can't print receipts because I don't use the app. So it doesn't have to be negative. I just want to make that really clear. Accountability isn't negative. It's just awareness and part of that communication. And when we've seen that kind of, hey, I don't really care if people do this way or not, even though we paid for something. When we see somebody accepting the excuse of, well, it wasn't my idea, so I'm not going to do it. There you go. It's easier to just abandon what the change is supposed to be than it is to try to manage the team that you're supposed to be uniting. So we see that formula quite a bit. Don't communicate. Don't make anybody responsible. Have different stories. Every time you ask, it's different. All those things are a great way to just abandon what you're trying to accomplish.
To fail, to assure
to fail. Yeah.
You and I were together at a client site when I met, you may have met him as well, a guy named Eric. I won't mention any other proper names, but we met a gentleman named Eric, and he told us some things that have stuck with me. And I've probably told the story 1,000 times, but one of the things that he said is, I'm the one, when I go out in the field, I'm by myself, I'm standing in front of a customer. And he said the words that have just stuck with me. He said, I feel like I'm on an island.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Man, that was such a powerful statement for me to hear from him. It's still, I have like an emotional reaction every time I tell that story, because I just think it was just like so real with that guy, Eric, that day. It just speaks to, like, this isn't just about the job. It isn't just about some new mobile device and some new mobile application. This is about a human being that feels stranded to an extent, because we're asking him to use technology that he may not understand, he may not feel prepared for. And
right.
The feeling that he described as being out on an island, even though he was in the middle of a busy city.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about, the example of the elevator and they're disconnected and they're out in the desert, it's like, that's kind of the visual. And even though the workers may not be physically there in that scenario, they may not really be in a desert or really in a basement with no connectivity, that is the way that they feel. And that, I believe, in large part is because of a lack of effective communications. And what we have seen too often, and this is what you and the team are really trying to help our customers think through a little bit, is that the communication at best is like a box checking exercise in some cases, right? Like, well, we sent out an email, or, we put up signs or something like that, but we really have to think about it all the way down to the level of Eric and say, well, how can we really make sure that all of the Erics that are out there, we don't ever put them in a position where they feel like they're stranded. The other thing that you mentioned that I think is really powerful, and I'd actually like you to touch on it a little bit more, is we've learned as a team the importance of the frontline leadership. So I'll admit, I think for the first few years of the business, and I've shared this with others before, I think we were so hyper focused on the men and women on the front lines themselves, because that's where we saw the problem that we were trying to help solve with Skyllful and the services and technology that we had there, that we briefly lost sight of the importance of the supervisors and managers in the field. You've had some experiences there. Anything that come to mind about lessons learned or observations that you've had when we see disconnect, or maybe just an absence of participation from the men and women in those frontline leadership positions?
Yeah, 100%. And the first thing that pops in my head isn't actually the answer to your question immediately, but it's a little bit of kudos to that position, because I'm out there. I'm a delivery driver. I deliver widgets to a store. I do this starting at 2 a.m. I work on Saturday and Sunday. I am just boots on the ground hustling. My supervisor is probably taking up routes when people call in sick, which happened a lot in 2020. When people turn over, they're probably picking up their own routes. They're also the foreman type of leader. So they're the ones that people call when there's a problem. So even though I'm not working at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, I'm getting phone calls at 2 a.m. on a Sunday when people need my help. So it is very mission critical that we incorporate who is, the kind of shepherding the people who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and how much heavy lifting are we asking them to do as well. And so I just want to give kind of kudos to them. There's essential workers need essential leaders, and they're out there just busting their boots to get stuff done. And I applaud them for that. What we have,
before we go past that, I've captured that quote that you just said: essential workers need essential leaders. I want to repeat that one more time. Essential workers need essential leaders. That is brilliant. And a lot can be summarized in that statement. So thank you. And sorry.
Of course. No. So I just first and foremost wanted to give them some kudos where it's due. That being said, there's always two paths that we've seen. We've seen the path where a leader or foreman, whatever the role is defined as, let's say that they for whatever reason don't invest the energy into the training, the development, the support of the people there. Not pointing fingers at whatever reason this happens. Sometimes it's because they have to pick up their own routes. But if I were to create a persona of someone who's like, do it or don't, I don't care. I just need to tick a box to show that I gave you training. I don't even care if you take it. And I'm making up, this isn't a real person. I'm just making up some kind of really, really negative persona. There's going to be much less success. And in fact, that kind of attitude becomes a little bit contagious, because it's easy to be non-compliant. It's actually the easier path to not learn new things and to just use inertia to get through your day. And I feel like that person would probably also not really deliver the business intent as much. They maybe wouldn't be so goal oriented, because they're willing to let the people who are achieving the goals slide. The opposite of that persona would be someone who is excited. They are wanting to simultaneously cut down on those 2 a.m. phone calls and empower their people to not have to call them, but retain the relationship where they can call them. They know that there's an open door policy. They understand from the business decisions that are made, and they can convey why that's a good thing for the folks that they're supervising. They can nurture these people. They can see other potential supervisors and the people they're talking to, who are now the driver every day. So I feel like there's a much more kind of positive culture versus negative culture when that one tier up leadership position is either just as invested in the success, the overall success, versus not really caring and just kind of showing up and getting through a day. And they don't realize that they're in a position to affect other people's careers because of it. So I would hopefully be able to get an ear of the person and kind of convert them a little bit into being invested in being that great go-between, but also making their job a little easier.
That's huge. And I think as I've thought about this problem in recent weeks and months, it's made me realize that some of the people that are probably the biggest challenges are challenges maybe for really good reasons. And what I mean by that is there's a tendency for some of those frontline supervisors to be know-it-alls, but in a good way. They know a lot. They were promoted because they have a lot of on-the-job experience, and they're seen as a go-to person on the team. And so when there's an opportunity for them to be promoted, they get that promotion. And I've often wondered if that part of their personality that makes them a great fit for that role makes them have a difficult, or causes them to have a difficult time letting go of being the subject matter expert for so many things firsthand. It makes them feel good that they're the go-to person for that stuff, right? And rather than look at it as an opportunity to develop the folks that work for them, and they actually cherish the fact that they're needed, that somebody's got to call them. And so they may complain and probably legitimately hate the call at 2 a.m., but there might be a part of their personality that likes that they're dependent on, right? And sees that as their role as a maybe newly minted supervisor or manager, in a frontline capacity like that. And I wonder if there are ways that people doing the things that we do and the clients that we work with can help to, reduce that burden on them and help them see the light that we're not trying to take you out of the mix. We're trying to save you for those moments that your skills are most necessary, for the people development aspects of your role are most necessary. And some of these other things, if you can teach them to leverage the resources that are being made available, then they may not have to call you at 2 a.m. to get every question answered, And it seems like it's been a tough thing to overcome in certain cases.
Yeah, no, and you're 100% correct. It's, you probably never take away something from an employee without giving them something to do in its place. When it comes to that. I think that's a really brilliant way to look at it. Drilling down, it's like you ask why 5 times before you get to the root of the answer, right? So, do you like people calling you at 2 a.m? Well, no. Why do you tolerate it? Well, because I enjoy that I'm the source of truth. I enjoy being the person they lean on. That is something that should absolutely be nurtured. And to your point, making something more efficient through technology, if it can be automated, it probably should be automated within reason. So saying, we are going to take this off your plate because you're so good at it and give you this instead. And I think that sometimes that happens organically, especially with people who are promoted to a leadership position, but it's never explicitly spoken. And there is a little bit of like, but I always check the mail or whatever it is that they're doing. And it's like, yes, and you did such a great job that now we're going to let you supervise a person checking the mail and you are going to do all the emails, whatever it is. Right. We need to be more explicit with our communication that we are seeing this as a promotion, and then also be amenable to feedback. How do you feel about that? No, I really actually like the calls at 2 a.m. I like that shift. I like that life. Maybe this is a person who should retain that task then, right. Or begin teaching others how to do it. So, I think it's a two-way street always, but it definitely, how people feel, their emotions about how they feel about their job, definitely contribute to what they do and how well they do it.
I've seen one of your favorite, or one of your qualities that is one of my favorites, is your ability to connect with people. And I remember that when you first came on the team, and I remember getting to witness that when we were out with that client that we were just talking about, and just seeing the way that you interacted with all the folks at this location, weird hours of the day and weird questions and all of that stuff. And you just have this great ability to bring them comfort and explain things in a very simple fashion. And so it was really fun to watch you do that. And I'm wondering if there are any observations that you've made of the men and women that you've interacted with on the front lines and just being on the project calls and things like that, that maybe the rest of us aren't seeing? Are there any kind of myths or misunderstandings about the men and women on the front lines that you think some of your exposure has kind of enlightened you about?
Oh man, where do I start? I guess if I had to describe the average frontline employee that I've encountered, first and foremost, they are a skilled, intelligent person. They know how to do stuff more than going through my master's program prepared me to do. As far as like this is a, you know, an oil rig, this is an elevator, this is my truck, and there's not a single question you can toss them that'll throw them. Oh yeah, I know. You know, I don't just know how to drive. I know how the engine works because they've been on their own. They've had to do these things. Just trying to broadly explain. You know, these people are usually pretty tech savvy. I've met more than one who, although they don't use a whole lot of mobile technology on the job, they go home to their giant battle station and game all day and have made their own server racks and such. So they're hobbyists. They're just really great salt of the earth people. And again, at the risk of getting mushy, the conveniences that I have are because of their labor. It's been very you know, great to meet them face to face, especially on the back of the COVID disruption that so many people suffered from. I think the other thing that would just surprise people, or maybe not surprise, but just hadn't thought about before, pardon me, is, you know, if I am working in a cubicle in a business and I have a question, I can lean, you know, hey, Susie, what's the answer? I have internet most likely, unless it's a weird day. I have my own personal cell phone there. I have my work device. I can probably get an answer to a question, let me say in a minute or less. And that's just a number I've pulled out of the air. If I am out working on a pipeline somewhere, I have no internet connection, there's nobody else out there with me, a customer's staring at me. You don't just feel like you're on an island, you are on an island. To get an answer, I may have to drive back to a coffee shop. I may have to drive back to a home office or a DC. There may not be anyone there who can help me. I may still be on my own to try to find the information somewhere. Let's hope the L&D team has kept the knowledge base correct. Let's hope nothing changed yesterday before 5 o'clock when I wasn't available. I'm pretty adrift, and that affects not only the personas we're talking about, the enjoyment of the job from the cube worker versus the on the field worker, but then the customer's, you know, experience. You know, I call a tech support line, I'm helped immediately. If somebody comes to my house, and I hope they can help me, but it's probably going to take hours, and they may have to come back. So, and again, I'm exaggerating the point to just kind of show, I don't think people fully wrap their brain around how quick and smart and resourceful these people need to be to get through their routes and to get through their day and deliver the SLAs for their companies. And yet they don't even have emails, some of them. They're missing one of the fundamental ways to even communicate. They're missing internet connectivity. They're missing a fundamental way to resource themselves for help. And I think most people would be most surprised about that, and maybe give a little more forgiveness when, you know, they've got someone at their house and they don't quite have all the answers immediately, that there's layers there, and this person's doing absolutely the best they can.
Yeah, that's really powerful stuff. And Jean, co-host of this show, has often said we have to stop thinking of frontline workers as the opposite of knowledge workers, because they are also knowledge workers. And that's one of the reasons we often use the term deskless to refer to the men and women that, you know, we're talking about out in the field or in a retail store. It's not that they're not a knowledge worker. It's just that they do their job away from a desk, which makes their role very different. And you've made a fantastic point several times today that they really have to think on their feet. There's a lot for them to have to decide. They have to be empowered to make decisions. And I guess that's really part of the point, going back to the supervisor conversation. It's like we need to free them from the challenges of using technology and being successful with the technology. Everybody gets That guy, Eric, that we were talking about before, he said, listen, I get it. It's a tool. I know I need to use it. I just wish I didn't have to, right? So he understands it. It's not that he doesn't get it. But it's just like, man, I'm out there trying to do all these other things in my job. And now you're telling me I got to change, my mobile device for my mobile application for the third time in 5 years. Like, this is frustrating. And what we need to do is make that process as easy for them as possible so that they can then go use their, their personality, their intellectual capabilities to solve the problems that, we can't automate.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a very human way to feel. There's nothing wrong with it. I get it. I can relate to that.
For sure. Yeah, it is. And it's one of the things that, you were saying earlier about how you've kind of thought back to other projects that you've been a part of and going through the change management, just to circle back around to the ATD program, how you've looked back and realized in some of the other projects you've been a part of where change had been implemented well and where it hadn't been implemented so well. And as I think back now, I've done the same thing, even though I haven't been through that same program. I think this podcast has actually made me go back and think about so many projects I've been a part of in the past. And when I've seen resistance from some of the team members and I've seen them getting frustrated, many times I chalked it up to a lack of willingness on their part. And I realize now, I think in a lot of cases, they were frustrated. They had anxiety, they had stress, they felt like they were on an island. A lot of the terms that Eric educated me on made me realize that these other men and women were probably feeling the same way. And I wish I could go back in time and ask better questions than maybe I did back then. I can't go back in time. So all we can do is kind of fix that going forward here. And that's really the purpose of this show, is to just say, like, what questions can we be asking better to make sure that we really understand that we have our finger on the pulse of the people that we're expecting to change, and what are the tools and strategies that we can put in place to make that process, as enjoyable as possible and ensure success for all involved.
Yeah, I agree.
You've been a fantastic guest today. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a fantastic departure. It's so exciting. You're the first person from the Skyllful team, other than Gene and me, to be able to have on the show and get your perspective. And today's been great. I think we should probably do this more often.
Yeah, I've had such a blast. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Well, awesome. Well, I do need to wrap the show up. And so for our audience, I am certain that you have found this conversation as enjoyable as I have. If so, please share and rate the podcast. As you hear me say every time at the end of the podcast, 5-star ratings help ensure that it gets promoted to other professionals like you that are innovating on the front lines. The podcast is sponsored by Skyllful, and we normally don't talk about Skyllful as much as we did today. But I appreciate you giving us an opportunity to show a little bit behind the scenes of some of the things that we have going on with our clients, and to be able to highlight one of our fantastic professionals on our team. So as a reminder, Skyllful is the mobile digital adoption platform for deskless and frontline workers. You can visit the website at skyllful.com. And we're always looking for new guests on the show. So if you or someone else you know is out there innovating on the front lines, we'd love to hear about it. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn and share your story. And we'll see you on the next episode. Erica, thanks again.
You bet. Thank you.